the daily live stream. What we got? August 30th, 2025 on Saturday. Welcome to Cozy Corner TV, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Kieran Smith. Colby Q and what's up, y'all? We are back on the corner. Okay, guys, I hope the week has been good to you thus far. It's nice out where I am. I hope it's nice out where you are. Go out, enjoy this long Labor Day weekend if you have Monday off. I do. And yeah, just spend time with friends, family, out in nature, in the rifle range, wherever you want, hunting, fishing, whatever you want to do at the beach. But yeah, enjoy your Labor Day weekend. I got a couple of clips for us to get into. First live stream of the day, so we're going to jump right in. Make sure you guys are good to take this type of news in full-fledged. So here we go. Shout out to NBC Chicago. We got full speech. Mayor Brandon Johnson announces executive order resisting immigration crackdown. We're going to take a look at that. I know he's going to be in a hot seat for that. CBS Mornings covered 2 young victims killed in Minneapolis school shooting remembered. Our young martyrs are remembered. Then we'll switch gears and go over to Will Kane Country. JD Vance exclusive interview with Will Kane. Only about a 22-minute clip, but we probably won't cover all of that. Maybe about 15 minutes and I'll stop. And then we'll end the live stream with, and I wanted to cover this, how long ago did Ben Shapiro cover this now? It wasn't too long ago, I don't believe.
Would this make you buy a ritual?
Okay, this was about 4 or 5 days ago. Okay. Yeah, I saw it the minute he covered it, but like the same exact day within a couple hours. But there was just other things I was focused on, so I didn't get to it. He says here that Ben Shapiro covered Snoop Dogg just triggered the LGBTQ community. So this is the new title of it, because it was originally titled Snoop Dogg thinks Disney is too woke, right? And that was going to be the title of the thumbnail, but technical difficulties with the thumbnail. So nonetheless, let's jump into the first clip of the live stream, guys. NBC Chicago, full speech. Mayor Brandon Johnson announces executive order resisting immigration crackdown. Let's take a listen.
Let me start by saying this. I do not take this executive action lightly. I would have preferred to work in a more collaborative approach. I would have preferred to do the work with our allies in City Council to pass legislation ultimately. And we were doing that. We're doing just that. But some of the leaders who we are working with are standing behind me today. But unfortunately, we do not have the luxury of time. We have received credible reports that we have days, not weeks, before our city sees some type of militarized activity by the federal government. It is unclear at this time what that will look like exactly. We may see militarized immigration enforcement. We may also see National Guard troops. We may even see active duty military and armed vehicles in our streets. We have not called for this. Our people have not asked for this, but nevertheless, we find ourselves having to respond to this. Let me be absolutely clear. Although we believe the reports we have received are highly credible, this is an erratic, impulsive administration, and it is not always possible to understand and know exactly how he will move. He could change his mind, he could reverse course. In fact, I encourage him to do that. But still, we take these threats seriously, and we find ourselves in a position where we must take immediate, drastic action to protect our people from federal overreach. I'm signing an executive order today.
Now, for those of you guys who don't know what this is actually Mayor Brandon Johnson. So he's the mayor of Chicago. What I don't like about this is that, it just seems like he's militarizing his city against the federal government, and you can't do things like this. And sometimes he drives me crazy for reasons like this. I mean, I get it. He doesn't like the fact that President Trump is thinking about bringing the National Guard or the military there. I mean, for the most part, we've seen it have positive influence on Washington, D.C., but that is the nation's capital. Again, he doesn't want them there. J.K. Pritzker doesn't want them there. But nonetheless, I think they still have to be mindful of the verbiage and the language that they use, because this is still their president as well. And, they make it seem like Donald Trump is like some type of enemy of the state, and I think it just paints a bad picture. That's all. It just bothers me the way that they kind of handle this.
I'm signing an executive order today that will launch the Protecting Chicago Initiative. This is a project that builds on the months of preparation that we have done that has led up to this very moment. Protecting Chicago will ensure that every Chicagoan knows their rights, that every single family is prepared, and every part of city government is directed to protect the people of Chicago from federal action. This sweeping executive order directs our Department of Law to pursue any and every legal mechanism to hold this administration accountable for violating the rights of Chicagoans. This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will not have our police officers who are working hard every single day to drive down crime deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president. This order affirms the CPD officers will be directed to wear CPD uniforms and refrain from wearing masks so that residents can clearly distinguish them from federal agents. And finally, as I said, it establishes the Protecting Chicago Initiative, the most sweeping campaign of any city in the country to protect ourselves from the threats and actions of this out-of-control administration. We will protect our Constitution, we will protect our city, and we will protect our people. We do not want to see tanks in our streets. We do not want to see families ripped apart. We do not want grandmothers thrown into the back of unmarked vans. We don't want to see homeless Chicagoans harassed or disappeared by federal agents. We don't want to see Chicagoans arrested for sitting on their porch. That's not who we are as a city, and that's not who we are as a nation. My team and I have spoken with the governor, the county president, and with our federal delegation, and we are in complete alignment. The time for action is now. And with that, I will sign this executive order and then return for follow-up questions.
Mike, ready?
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 40.
So mind you, this is Mayor Brandon Johnson. You know, and what he's doing is just driving me crazy because, mind you, he's signing this executive order, and this executive order is to resist. The specific order is to resist immigration crackdown. And I'm just thinking to myself, what are you gonna do, Mayor Johnson, to resist this? Like, how exactly do you plan on stopping this? And there's no way that he can really go about this, and he looks good. There's no way this is gonna play out and he looks good. And that's why it's frustrating. You know, I think it's easier for him to just cooperate with the president. I'm not saying bow down, not stand up for what he believes in. I just think this whole thing paints a bad picture, and I think it's just easier to cooperate with the federal government. I don't see how he's going to sign an executive order resisting immigration crackdown, and the federal government is going to have to step in. It just doesn't make sense, and I don't think it's going to work out well for him. But nonetheless, we're going to follow it, and we're going to see what it looks like in the next couple days. So we're going to switch gears and go over to CBS Mornings. Shout out to them. 2 young victims killed in Minneapolis school shooting remembered. So this was the shooting that took place yesterday in the Minneapolis church/school. And there were 17 injured and 2 children that were killed. I believe 1 is still in critical condition. So let's take a listen.
We're going to begin with this terrible story, the deadly mass shooting in Minneapolis and the families of the 2 children who were killed. 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel, we now know their names, 10-year-old Harper Moisky. Fletcher's father said this about his son, that he loved fishing, cooking, and any sport that he was allowed to play. Harper's family said in a statement that she was bright, she was joyful, and she was deeply loved. Police say that the shooter fired repeatedly into her church, where children and adults were celebrating morning mass. They were in the middle of prayers. 18 other people were wounded. We'll have more on those victims in just a moment, but first we're going to go to Usher Qureshi. He's in Minneapolis. He's been following this investigation. Usher, the story is heartbreaking to all of us. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail. Well, law enforcement sources tell CBS News the shooter was in the church here at Annunciation Catholic School just a few weeks ago. The shooter told an employee the visit was to reconnect with faith. Investigators now believe the shooter used that visit to conduct surveillance ahead of the deadly attack.
The shooter wanted to kill children, defenseless children.
Police say the shooter couldn't see the hundreds of students and staff inside Annunciation Catholic School as bullets shattered the stained glass church windows Wednesday. The first 911 calls came at 8:27 a.m.
A Minneapolis police officer ran into the church and was met by a parishioner who directed him towards where the gunman had been.
The shooter, identified as 23-year-old Robin Westman, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Investigators are pouring through hundreds of journal pages left behind, filled with disturbing messages.
The shooter's heart was full of hate.
Approximately 116 rifle rounds, 3 shotgun shells, and a live handgun round that police believe jammed in the chamber were found at the scene, along with 3 legally purchased weapons.
The solutions are very clear.
Congresswoman Ilhan Omar represents Annunciation's district. She's pushing for stricter gun laws.
We can't legislate the intent that people have, but we can make sure that they do not have the resources to be able to carry out their monstrous intent.
It's a deep hurt. There's anger. There's questioning.
Principal Matthew DeBoer spoke to CBS Evening News co-anchor Maurice Dubois about meeting with the victims' families.
What did you tell them?
I told them that I was there. I held their kids' hands. And I told them that their parents loved them, that I loved them, and I gave them a kiss. And it was hard. But they deserve to know that someone was with their kids. And that time of their lives were stolen from them.
Those stolen lives belong to 10-year-old Harper Moisty and 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel.
We will never be allowed to hold him, talk to him, play with him, and watch him grow into the wonderful young man he was on the path to becoming.
Jesse Merkel honored his son Thursday.
Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life. Give your kids an extra hug and kiss today. We love you, Fletcher. You'll always be with us.
Just an incredibly powerful statement. Jesse Merkel also shared a message of hope that we want you to hear. Remember, this is just one day after his son was killed.
I'm hopeful that all the wounded are able to make a full recovery and return home to their families. And finally, all the people, and especially the children, impacted by this horrific event are able to recover mentally and find strength to live loving, happy, and full lives.
Usher, thank you. What a powerful thing for him to say, considering the pain he's feeling. Anger and hurt is what a lot of us are feeling at this moment. Thank you so much.
Go to the website you love.
Yeah, he I think it's very courageous and caring of him to say that, because I know he's in pain right now from such a stupid, just a stupid, idiotic act of someone just not in the right headspace, clearly, and definitely needing help. And it's just sad because, his son is gone. Just a couple of he started the week. He woke up on Monday with his son, and, it's Saturday, and the son's not there. And I mean, or the other family's daughter. And I know that that's a horrible reality to live with. I watched my mother actually deal with that reality, so I know that it's a hurtful thing. We're going to switch gears, guys, and go over to Will Kane Country. Shout out to Will Kane. JD Vance exclusive interview with Will Kane. So let's take a look into this conversation between Will Kane and JD Vance. It's about a 22-minute clip. We're probably only going to go about maybe 15 minutes or so in. So not going to go the whole way through. So let's take a listen.
Mr. Vice President, it's great to see you here.
Good to see you, man.
Mid-City Steel, La Crosse, Wisconsin. Wisconsin, the middle of America, to celebrate the big, beautiful bill.
Of course. Yeah, we're thrilled to be here. And this is one of these businesses, the steel manufacturer, employs a lot of good people, uses a lot of technology. So people, I think, sometimes assume that manufacturing is sort of old, dirty, doesn't use technology. This is a good business. It's an example of leaning into American investment, American innovation. Obviously, the people here have great jobs. And you know my story, Will, but I grew up in a town where we were shedding manufacturing jobs because politicians had made stupid decisions. We're now adding manufacturing jobs and adding productivity in this economy thanks to the things that the president and the Republican Congress have done. So we're here to talk about it, here to talk about the benefits of the working families tax cuts, and obviously fire people up a little bit. Just, it's good. It's good to get out of Washington. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you in Middle America. You bring up Milltown, Ohio. It's a lot like La Crosse, Wisconsin. It's not
Very
like
similar.
my hometown of Sherman, Texas. All about 40 to 50,000 people.
Yep.
Manufacturing towns. And there's a lot of excitement today, but it hasn't always been that way, to your point. Whether or not it's been job loss, an opioid crisis, a cultural malaise, and a sense of loss of purpose, I believe, is deeply rooted in what's happened in Middle America. What do you think that's done to America?
Well, I think it was very bad for our country, and all these problems are very connected, right? You take a dad who's got a good middle-class manufacturing job, is able to support, family, a couple of kids, and then that job disappears. Well, now the family is feeling financial stress that it wasn't 10 years ago, it wasn't 20 years ago. So sometimes families dissolve in the wake of that. That stress affects the kids. Some of those people turn to drugs, and all this stuff is very connected. And if you look at what the president is trying to do, it's also all connected. And I think that it's why it's leading to this very early days of an American Renaissance, because you bring jobs back, you give people hope, optimism, you give them a little extra money to spend in their pocket. Maybe some of those people go and start a business, but then simultaneously, we're focused on the southern border because we don't want this poison to come into these communities and destroy people from fentanyl and other related problems. So I kind of think in the same way that America's decline was a problem of interconnected issues, I think this American Renaissance led by the president is also interconnected, and we're trying to work on all these different problems because if we solve all these problems, it leads to a virtuous cycle.
Well, the big, beautiful bill is big. It is interconnected as well.
It is.
What would you say to the people that are sitting right on the other side of this curtain? By the way, there's a beautiful bridge being built right on the other side of this curtain. But what would you say to them about the big, beautiful bill and how it begins to address the depth of what you just laid out, those problems?
Well, I'd say, look, it's all connected. We're going to talk to, obviously, in a little bit to the crowd that's assembled. We're going to say a few things. Number one is you've got the biggest amount of money for border enforcement that we've seen in our country's history. Those criminal cartels that are bringing the fentanyl into places like Wisconsin that are killing people by the bushel, we are now going to war against those cartels in a way that we've never done before.
So today's the day. I've got my RTA mock system and Coyote appliances. And they did tell me it was only going to take a few minutes. And I got to say, they were right.
Because of that big beautiful bill. We've also got incredible working families tax cuts to reinvigorate the economy here in Wisconsin.
That was distracting.
History. Those criminal cartels that are bringing the fentanyl into places like Wisconsin that are killing people by the bushel, we are now going to war against those cartels in a way that we've never done before because of that big beautiful bill. We've also got incredible working families tax cuts to reinvigorate the economy here in Wisconsin. So you've got the child tax credit going up. You've got no tax on overtime, no tax on tips. 27% of Wisconsin workers worked an overtime shift in the last year. 5% of Wisconsin workers rely on tips, either in part or entirely. So this is going to mean a lot more money in people's pockets. And of course, if they got more money in their pocket, they can spend it on American-made products. And that's the final point is the President of the United States, this is not the main part of the working families tax cuts. We're going to make it easier to save and invest in the United States of America. The tariffs, of course, are separate, but it's all connected. Because if we make it easier to build things in the United States of America, we're also making it harder to build things overseas. This generation of failed American economic policy where we rewarded companies for putting factories in Mexico or in China or somewhere else. No, we got to reward people for putting factories right here in middle America, right here in Wisconsin, employing good American workers to make great American products. That's the whole purpose of President Trump's economic agenda. And again, it's already bearing real fruit, but it's going to, I think, lead to a great American Renaissance over the next 3 years.
I saw this morning that in 74 out of 100 metro areas in the United States, half of all starter homes are unaffordable for the average American worker. You're the first millennial vice president. You have personal experience with people of this generation not being able to make that leap, that first economic leap into adulthood, home ownership. Is the system rigged?
Oh, the system is absolutely
Feels
rigged.
like
I mean,
it.
look, you go back to the 4 years of the Biden administration, from 2021 until 2025, when we took over, the average price of a new home doubled. That's a 100% increase in 4 years. That priced millions upon millions of young Americans out of the housing market. Now, there's a little bit of good news here, because even though we've only been in power for about 7 months, that you've already seen home prices flatten off a little bit. They've gone up, depending on what metric you believe, about 1%, maybe less than 1%. That's a big, big improvement, but there's so much more that we got to do. And this is why the President of the United States goes after Jerome Powell for being too late, because, of course, the housing crisis in this country is really two things. Number one, that the prices are too high. We've made some progress on that. In some ways, more importantly, the interest rates are too high. So even if you can afford the top line dollar value of a home, if the interest rates are way too high because the Federal Reserve isn't doing its job, that also makes the American dream of home ownership unaffordable. So we're really working on both of those things. We're going to lower interest rates, we're going to lower housing prices. We've made, again, progress, but it's early, and we realize there's a lot more work to do.
Absolutely, the system is rigged. You've been a longtime critic of the system, but now you're the Vice President of the United States, and one could argue you are the system. So how do you fix a rigged system?
Well, we inherited a rigged system, but I think that in 7 months we've already made a lot of progress to fix this. If you go back to, again, 100% housing price increase in 4 years under Joe Biden, we've already seen that level off under Donald Trump. Now, to fix the rigged system, you ask that question, you got to understand the root causes here. Why did housing get so unaffordable for American citizens? Two big problems. Number one, I already talked about, interest rates were too high. Number two, you had way too many people in this country who are competing against American citizens for scarce homes, and that's the illegal immigration problem. Why has housing leveled off over the past 6 months? I really believe the main driver is you've had negative net migration into the United States for the first time in 60 years in this country. You cannot flood the United States of America with 20, 30, 40 million people who have no legal right to be here, have them compete against young American families for homes, and not expect the price to skyrocket. It's a simple supply and demand. You increase the demand, you're going to increase the price. And the final thing I want to say here is we're working on issues right now in the White House every single day, because we want to make it easier to build homes too. Because in the same way that getting illegal aliens out of this country means fewer people competing against young American families, we also want to increase the housing stock in this country by making it easier to build. So we're working on all this stuff, but man, we got to be honest. The system was rigged against Americans, especially young Americans, for a very long time. We're making progress to unrig it, but it's going to take some time.
You brought up tariffs, you brought up bringing manufacturing back home. I had the opportunity to have dinner a week or two ago in Texas with several big corporate CEOs across the country. And I did hear concern about tariffs. I heard concern not from people who necessarily vote Democrat, but people that are involved in the economy. Their concern was uncertainty, and their concern was that we might see inflation in the fourth quarter of 2025 or the first quarter of 2026. What would you say to those CEOs?
Well, let me say a couple of things. So first of all, I understand the point about uncertainty. I mean, the president's been very clear here. The countries have a tariff rate. If they open up their market, that tariff rate might go lower. But people at this point, I don't think that there's uncertainty about this. The president has delivered very clear guidance to the market about what tariff rate each particular country is going to pay. Obviously, in threatening higher tariff rates, he was able to get some markets opened up for our country. But I think at this point, it's pretty clear which countries are going to be paying which tariffs. And again, on this concern about inflation, I've heard people say many years now that Donald Trump's tariffs are going to cause inflation. They didn't cause inflation during the Trump administration. We keep on defying economists' expectations. They keep on saying inflation is going to be 3, 4, 5%. It ends up being 2%, which is exactly where you want it. So we're very sensitive to this. We're obviously monitoring this stuff. But I think the evidence is that what these tariffs have done is caused a lot of capital to flow into our country, a lot of new facilities being built in our country. And we don't see the evidence yet And I've been skeptical from the very beginning that President Trump's tariffs are going to cause prices to rise. What they're going to do is cause people to come back into our country. And the final point on this, Will, is the president said this better than anybody. You know what your tariff rate is if you build in the United States of America? It is zero. You don't pay a tariff if you build in the United States. So why not employ American workers? Build your products closer to the people who are going to be consuming those things. That's the whole point of President Trump's economic vision, is more for America, more in America, more by American workers. And if we do that and pursue that policy, it's going to make everybody better off.
It's very fair and very accurate. The doomsday predictions have been consistent and consistently wrong.
Yes.
Will they remain wrong? Time will tell, perhaps later into this year. Let's return to culture for just one moment.
Sure.
You spent a lot of time talking about Europe, the migration crisis of Germany, of England. You've talked about free speech. Why is it so important for you to focus on Europe?
Well, I think in some ways the problems of Europe mirror the problems of America. And anything that I've said about Europe, I've said 10 times, and is even as true or more true in the United States of America. We, of course, had a wide open southern border under Joe Biden. I think the Europeans have got to learn the hard lessons. What happens is you get higher crime, you get less cultural cohesion, you get more just problems that come from importing millions and millions of low-wage foreigners into your country. The Europeans have got to learn that lesson in the same way that I think the United States had to learn that lesson. You've seen in the same way that the Biden administration went after social media companies to censor their fellow citizens, you've seen the very same thing happen in Europe, where rather than debate ideas, you have certain European leaders who would rather censor their fellow citizens. So I think fundamentally there's so much cultural similarity between us and Europe. Obviously, the United States was born out of a European country, the United Kingdom. I think it's important to recognize those cultural similarities, and importantly, what's happening in Europe does affect the United States and vice versa. And so I think it's important for us to step back and say, look, the West, right? That's Europe and America together. We got too comfortable with open borders. We got too comfortable with censorship. And I think the president has shown that if you go in the other direction, if you close down your borders and actually give free speech to your people, you can really energize the culture in these countries.
Europe is the bedrock of Western civilization. Right. It's the foundation of Western civilization. And that seems to be not just questioned, but under threat. Have you seen a story out of England where the English flag has simultaneously become controversial and patriotic? Some in that country see it as a sign of protest, others see it as a sign of patriotism. And
that's crazy.
A little reflected in what's happening here in America.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, again, so much of what happens in Europe happens in America and vice versa. You know, sometimes we're on the leading edge of a trend, sometimes they're on the leading edge of a trend. But I remember back in the crazy BLM summer of 2020, I had a buddy of mine say, you know, I was going to put the American flag out today, but I'm worried that some BLM person is going to ransack my house or you know, come and vandalize in some way because they see the American flag somehow as this controversial symbol. It's not a controversial symbol. Nothing should be less controversial than the American flag. It's the one thing that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, should unite us all together. We should all love our country, be proud of our country. So again, some of these trends where you have Americans worried.
By studying geometry, we can think about our first principles.
About flying the American, love our country, be proud of our country. So again, some of these trends where you have Americans worried about flying the American flag because they think their house is going to get vandalized. First of all, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's
Second of all, you see the same things happening in Europe, and I think we just have to be on guard against this stuff. It's okay to be proud of your country. It's in fact a good thing to be proud of your country, and we should push back against the crazies who say we should be so ashamed of our culture and of our heritage that we shouldn't be willing to fly a flag. It's craziness. We got to call that craziness out. I'd encourage our European friends to follow suit.
You brought up how interconnected every single one of these problems are, from culture to the economy. But if I could say to you, you could snap your fingers, politics be damned, and you could fix one problem at the root of all of this in America. You've voted mass migration, you've voted immigration, you talk about the family unit, but what would be the root unit you would snap your fingers and fix?
It's probably the migration problem. And I think, again, the President of the United States has shown in just a few short months what you can do. We've got illegal border crossings effectively at zero. We've got net migration negative in this country for the first time. And why do I say that? First of all, I think it's very hard to feel, you know, like you're part of the same country when your leadership brings in tens of millions of people uninvited. So that sense of shared American identity, the sense that we're part of the same American family, I think that gets destroyed when you import 20, 30 million people without any democratic check on it. So that's number one. Number two, I think it's terrible for the wages of working class people. When you see this in every place where you bring in low wage immigrants, it's bad for the wages of Americans who just want to work a good job and earn a good wage in their communities. And the third thing that I point out is crime and drugs. We know that while most, of course, even illegal immigrants are not bringing in fentanyl, they are used by the cartels as vectors to traffic this illegal poison. So it makes the opioid problem worse, it makes wages worse, and it makes our sense of common American identity worse. I think the migration issue really is the root of what went wrong during the Biden administration. By the way, it's why the Democrats are so obsessed with it. You ask yourself, like, what does the modern National Democratic Party believe in? What do they fight most aggressively for? They fight most aggressively to continue to flood the United States with millions and millions of low-wage immigrants. The fact that that is the reason for existing for the Democratic Party should make all Americans sort of step back and say, what the hell is wrong with these people?
That was
Mamdani is the
probably
leading
President
candidate
Trump would
for
say
mayor
that.
of New York City. Yes, your Mima, by the way, I think, was a lifelong Democrat.
She was.
What do you think it says about the left that Zoran Mamdani is a leading candidate for a big political
They're all
office as a
drunk.
Democrat? And what would your Mima say about modern Democrats?
I think Mamaw would say this is crazy.
They lost
I think
it.
that she would say the modern Democratic Party doesn't represent her at all. By the way, there are two things that Mamaw, yes, she was a lifelong Democrat. She believed in standing up for working people. She believed in good wages for a good job. She was her husband was a union Democrat for 40 years, and that's really where it came from. But one, she thought politicians ought to have a sense of humor. Democrats, the one thing they should learn from President Trump is to laugh at themselves a little bit. They don't have to be so serious. They don't have to get offended at everything. Sometimes it's actually a good thing to have a sense of humor about our political process. And the second thing is, Mamaw, she was a Democrat who loved this country and felt gratitude for this country. She had multiple relatives who served in World War II, who served in World War I. She remembered that war like it was yesterday. She would tell me about World War II and her brother and her dad going off to fight in the Pacific. Does Mamdani, when you hear him speak, is this a man who feels gratitude for the United States of America? Is this a man who feels grateful for all of the opportunities, the incredible bounty of this country? I don't know the guy, but my sense is he's had a very good life in this country. It would be nice for him to occasionally show a sense of gratitude instead of just attacking the United States for all of its problems.
You bring up humor. Gavin Newsom sure thinks he's a comedian these days on social media, and so does much of the left. His polling numbers have gone way up since he started mimicking President Trump on social media.
Yeah.
What do you make of Governor Newsom?
I make of Governor Newsom that you said he's mimicking Donald Trump, and I think that's exactly right. The lesson of Donald Trump, the lesson of President Trump in American politics is you've got to be authentic to yourself. And when I see Gavin Newsom trying to act like Donald Trump, that's the opposite of authenticity. He's not trying to be Gavin Newsom, whoever that is. He's trying to be a fake carbon copy of Donald Trump, and it just doesn't work. You can't mimic the king. You can't mimic the master. You ought to just go and be yourself. And I think the American people would like that a lot more than a cheap imitation of the President of the United States.
Two more questions. One important to our country, one important to you and me. This story, I know you're aware of, out of Minneapolis, where this school shooter at a Catholic school killed 2 young children, trans-identified. The latest in the news is he may have actually regretted his transition. There's a conversation today. The mayor of Minneapolis says it's hate to focus on his identity. There are others that say it's necessary to tell the truth. What do you make of this story? And by the way, what do you make of the response of so many that seem to reject the prayers of those that want to reach out?
Yeah.
It seems to be a real antagonism to spirituality.
Well, I think there are a lot of things here. I think the first and most important thing, again, I really do see us as one American family, and you have to think about those parents and those kids and what they've gone through, and especially the kids who lost their lives. This is the most heartbreaking thing imaginable. And we should be praying for those kids. We should be thinking about those families. We should be doing everything that we can to try to help them. I mean, I took my 5-year-old 2 days ago to his Catholic school where he became a kindergarten, his first day of kindergarten. And then the very next day, you see something like this happen. This is just an unbelievable tragedy. And we have to remember that there are a couple of families who yesterday had the worst day of their lives. Yep. And it's not going to get much better from here because of what this evil person took from these families, which is these two beautiful kids. That's my first response to it. My second response to it is I'm praying every single day, multiple times a day, that while two deaths is tragic, 3 deaths is even more tragic, and I hope it stays at 2, because there still are some kids who are receiving a pretty serious condition in hospitals, so we're praying for their swift recovery. And I think on the broader stuff, I mean, look, clearly this person was a mentally deranged human being. Clearly it was a transgender individual. We're going to learn a lot more, and I think the FBI and local authorities ought to try to get to the bottom of this. But you don't go and shoot up innocent children unless you are a clearly screwed up person. And so that's obviously true. But I do think that, look, we are so soon after this tragedy. I guess it's going to air this afternoon. But we're so soon after this tragedy that I think that it would be nice if we as a country could unite, say a prayer for these innocent victims, say a prayer for the kids who are still recovering, that they make a full recovery, focus on the investigation and getting to the bottom of this thing, and not immediately make it about politics. And my final point on this is when I see far-left politicians say, how dare you offer thoughts and prayers, you need action, you know. Yeah, I don't care about your prayers, I care about what you're going to do to prevent this from happening. Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't you pray for the speedy recovery of these kids who literally just got shot yesterday, while at the same time committing to making sure this doesn't happen again or that it happens as infrequently as possible? I don't think there's anything inconsistent about saying a prayer to God for these innocent, beautiful kids, while also thinking constructively about how we're going to prevent this from happening the next time. You can do both of those things. You can hold a thought to both of those thoughts in your head at the same time. And Will, if you are a politician or you're a media commentator and 2 beautiful babies just got murdered while praying, and your politics force you to contend prayer in response to it, you ought to get new politics because something very wrong has gone on inside your soul.
All right, lastly, on a lighter note, I'm disappointed to see your blue tie. I, as a specific rebuke to you and the Ohio State Buckeyes today, chose a burnt orange tie. This weekend, we have number 1 versus number 2, the University of Texas versus Ohio State. Let's just revisit what has to be one of your most embarrassing moments as vice president. I can't even imagine. What is it like to drop the national championship trophy?
It's awful. Let me tell you, it's awful. And my friends gave me hell for it. And it's one of those moments I'll never live down. I didn't break it though. It was made of solid, good steel, I guess.
I did analyze it play by play.
No, so I could give you a whole backstory about. I didn't know that there's. So it's not the base fell off. The base is meant to come off.
Right.
You're not meant to lift it up by the base, which is the mistake that I made. You're supposed to just take the trophy out of the base. So anyway, that was the first error that led to a series of problems. But you know, I looked at the line yesterday, and I think Ohio State were 12-point dogs to Texas.
No, you're favored. I believe you're favored by 3. You're at home. You're number 2.
Okay.
We're gonna look.
Okay. I thought somebody sent me a line. Yeah, that's what I said, because we're in Columbus. Somebody sent me a line that had us minus 11.5, and I was like, that sounds crazy to me. I think it's going to be a good game. You guys have a hell of a team. Obviously, Archie Manning has good genes, as the president would say. So hopefully he doesn't have too good of a day at Ohio Stadium.
You have a prediction?
Oh man,
Texas Longhorns by 1 million.
Not a million, no, that's crazy. A million's crazy.
All right. I can't wait to see you out.
That's a confident prediction.
All right. Thank you, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I think JD Vance makes a great point here. When he talks about the prayer and the action, that was really irritating for me to see yesterday. A lot of people, and I'm going to say for the most part, a lot of them were extreme leftists. And it was really annoying to see, especially where Tim Walsh was at and some of the people who came after he spoke. And they're just like, I don't want to hear about your prayers and it's not about that. And we're past that. And even some news anchors were saying that. And I was just like, I was a little discouraged. But other than that, I was disgusted. Because I was like, dude, you know what? If you're not interested in prayer, like, you could just keep it to yourself. But for someone to actually have died and for you to say that prayers are useless, I'm like, dude, this person clearly doesn't know who God is. That was crazy to say. It was really crazy for me to hear, and I also felt bad about it because I thought to myself, what do the parents think about that? Hearing somebody say like, prayer is not a necessary thing. I just thought it was like a horrible thing to hear them say, but not shocking. All right, guys, so we're gonna switch gears. Let's go to Ben Shapiro now. He's covering Snoop Dogg talking about how he just triggered the LGBTQ community. And the original title to this actually was Snoop Dogg says Disney is too woke. So let's take a listen to this.
They're going to ask questions.
Yeah.
They are going to ask, I don't have the answer.
Yeah, as a person with kids, these are questions that come up, and you have to determine how you're going to answer these questions with your kids. But you should be able to do so in your own good time without being sandbagged by the idiots at Disney who have decided to lace in the Pride Progress flag into the middle of a kids movie. And meanwhile, Snoop Dogg has sounded off on Lightyear. Now, you'll recall that Lightyear was a deeply unsuccessful Disney movie. This is during Disney's height of woke, where they decided that in a children's movie, they're just going to have a lesbian couple as a key part of the story. And Snoop Dogg was like, I took my kids to see a Disney movie. I really wasn't interested in discussing the vagaries of lesbian marriage.
I took my grandson to see what was the movie with Buzz Lightyear.
Toy Story?
Not that one, but
the new Buzz. The Lightyear. I think it's
yeah,
the
but
Lightyear.
Kiki Palmer's in that movie.
Okay.
She plays like the daughter. So we watching it, and the lady, which is Kiki's mama, they move on to the space years, they move down the line, they're like, and she had a baby with a woman. Oh, my grandson in the middle of the movie like, Papa Snoop, how she have a baby with a woman? She a woman. Oh, I just can't watch the damn movie. Hey man, watch the movie. They just said she had a baby. They both women. How did she have a baby? Shh. The movie ain't over with. So it's like, I'm scared to go to the movies now. Like, y'all throwing me in the middle that I don't have an answer for.
What was it? What'd you tell them?
Watch the movie. Eat this popcorn.
You said we don't know. We don't know.
It threw me for a loop. I'm like, what part of the movie was this? These are kids that we have to show that at this age, like
that part.
They're going to ask questions.
Yeah.
They are going to ask. I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yes. So the entire left went insane on this. Apparently, this was terrible. So that's right. You didn't go to Lightyear because you wish to explain the morality of gay marriage or the mechanics of baby making, because in order to explain that two women cannot biologically have a baby together, you have to explain how a man and a woman can have a baby together. Right? I mean, that's how it works. You don't wish to answer those questions to your 6-year-old while you're watching a movie about Buzz Lightyear. And apparently, everyone got very, very angry at Snoop Dogg for saying this, at least in the online world. Some were slamming him as the biggest sellout in hip-hop. I wasn't aware that hip-hop demanded.
What?
Hip-hop, one of the most patriarchal and sexist of all art forms. I wasn't aware that hip-hop demanded that you be on side when it comes to explaining lesbian relationships to your 6-year-old at a Lightyear movie.
That's crazy.
One ex-user worried, how is answering his grandson's question even close to the horrors of answering how a man has a baby? The whole point is that if you want to explain that two women cannot have a baby together, then you have to explain how a man and a woman do have a baby. So you do have to actually explain both, right? And as a person with kids, these are questions that come up, and you have to determine how you're going to answer these questions with your kids. But you should be able to do so in your own good time without being sandbagged by the idiots at Disney who have decided to lace in the Pride Progress flag into the middle of a kids movie. This is the entire problem in the first place. It's why Lightyear did zero business. Zero. And I'm glad that Disney is pulling back from a lot of that stuff, it appears. I mean, obviously, one of the fundamental bases of explaining these things to your kids is that mommy matters and daddy matters, and mommy and daddy are different. They're not the same. See, this is something that kids inherently understand. There are things kids inherently understand. And trying to explain to them the counterintuitive nature of an entire institution that never existed for pretty much all of human history, trying to explain that because you took your kids to an animated film about Buzz Lightyear is ridiculous. Snoop Dogg is not wrong here. Everybody bashing Snoop Dogg, saying, believe me, Snoop Dogg is going to end up having these conversations with his grandkids because people end up having conversations about all sorts of weird stuff that is inappropriate for children. Yeah. But it's also amazing to me that for the left, the idea is to foster these conversations at an age when kids cannot fully understand. So you're supposed to discuss them in vague terminology. I think the idea here is that you're supposed to say something like, well, babies are made a lot of ways, because you don't want to answer the question, as opposed to the actual answer, which is it takes a man and a woman to make a baby. And that is the fundamental reason why men marry women, is for the baby making and the baby raising. And if you don't want to have that conversation with your kids, then you end up with, shh, don't watch the movie on the one hand, or the Mrs. Doubtfire, there's so many different types of families. Families are all made in so many different types of, which is not on a fundamental moral basis the truth. All of human existence rests on man, woman, child. That is all of it. That is what it all rests on. And other arrangements that adults make between themselves are, in the general scheme of human reproduction and maintenance of society, wildly unimportant compared to man, woman, child. So the fact that you have Disney attempting to push it, this is why they lost business. Because people don't want to have that conversation with their 6-year-old. They want to have that conversation in their own good time with their 15-year-old. That would be the reason. It is amazing how, in the online world, we all have to be ushered into your level of crazy. So, well done to Snoop Dogg. I guess that Snoop Dogg and I are founding a label together, I guess is the answer here. If you're a homeowner, you need to listen to this. In today's AI and cyber world, scammers are stealing home titles and your equity. Already meanwhile, J.D. Vance is speaking out, Vice President, about the raid on John Bolton's house. And again, as I've said before, I don't like the look of it, but we'll find out whether there's anything criminal going on. By the way, I took the same perspective on the original Mar-a-Lago raid, and it turned out there was nothing there. It was ridiculous. There's really no basis for it. Well, when it comes to the raid on John Bolton's house, I'll take the same perspective. Don't like the look of it. Does not look good. We'll find out whether there is a there there. J.D. Vance says, if there's no crime there, we're not prosecuting it.
Classified documents are certainly part of it, but I think that there's a broad concern about Ambassador Bolton. They're going to look into it, and like I said, if there's no crime here, we're not going to prosecute it. If there is a crime here, of course, Ambassador Bolton will get his day in court. That's how it should be. But again, our focus here is on, did he break the law? Did he commit crimes against the American people? If so, then he deserves to be prosecuted.
Okay, so we're going to find that out in relatively short order. J.D. Vance went on to defend the Bolton raid in broader terms. Here he was.
Who has said it looks a lot like retribution, Kristen? A lot of people who tried to throw Donald Trump in prison for completely fake charges that were later thrown out by multiple different courts. I suspect that if the media and the American people let this case actually unfold, if they let the investigation unfold as it's currently doing, they're going to find out that what we're doing is being very deliberate and being very driven by the national interest and by the law here, and that's as it should be.
Okay, so first of all, I think there are a lot of people who are saying that it looks kind of like retaliation because President Trump obviously doesn't like John Bolton. However, this one falls under the sort of whataboutism category. Okay, so yes, it was wrong for the Biden administration to target President Trump and other Trump officials. And also, it would be wrong for President Trump to target people that he doesn't like. This is not what the uses of law enforcement report. Now, as I say, I'm holding off judgment on this because maybe John Bolton does have a bunch of classified documents in his house. Maybe the way that, maybe that's right. But if the idea is that because somebody did X, now I get to do X, and everybody is excused in doing X, and the goal is not to get people to stop doing it. It's not a mutually assured destruction situation. It is okay, they lowered the bar, now I'm lowering the bar, now we'll just keep lowering the bar. Now you end up with a spiral to nowhere, and that is not going to be particularly good for the country. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe,
shout out to Ben Shapiro. That was a good cover. I appreciated him.
People end up having conversations about all sorts of weird stuff that is inappropriate for children. But it's also amazing to me that for the left, the idea is to foster these conversations at an age when kids cannot fully understand.
And they seem to not understand that. That's why I can appreciate him covering this, because he says, shout out to Snoop, because eventually he's going to have those conversations because people end up having conversations, inappropriate conversations with kids about things because people are always showing things that kids shouldn't see, at least at certain ages, right? I think he makes a great point here when he says that parents rather have that conversation with their 15-year-old, not their 16-year-old. If you have children, you would understand that. Your 6-year-old asking you that question is extremely uncomfortable. If anything, you would probably get upset about it. That's why I can see Snoop saying like, hey, don't answer these questions now. Just keep watching the movie. But he literally says, like, now I'm scared to go to the movies because you guys are putting me in the middle of things that I just came to watch the movie, and now I got to answer questions that I don't even want to answer. And I'm like, it's crazy, right? Because you can hear this stuff on the news, and at first you can say, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, oh, it might be just a question. But then when you actually get put in a situation, you really think to yourself, like, is it necessary for something like this to be in a child's movie? Like, I mean, I get it. There's all types of families in the world. Like, the kids are going to see that. But why not just promote, like, the nuclear family? And then, yeah, you're going to have a whole bunch of people say, oh, you hate to see gay families, or you hate. And it doesn't have anything to do with that. It has everything to do with what Ben Shapiro and now Snoop Dogg are saying. Like, you putting me in situations that I'm just trying to come to the movie theater with my grandson and watch a movie, and now I have to answer questions about a lesbian relationship. I wasn't prepared to do all of that. And I think he makes a good point. So I appreciate you guys hanging out. We'll be back in a little while for the second live stream of the night. My fault about the thumbnail, guys. I'm not sure if it's the YouTube app or what, but if I can fix it, I'll get it uploaded. If I can't, nonetheless, we'll still be back in a couple hours for the second live stream. So I'll see you guys in a few hours. Peace.